My name is Billy DeBose. You may remember me as the director and actor of Godzilla Battle Royale, the fan film. Thank you.
My name is Nick Crispino. I'm a New York-based content creator. I run the page Kaiju Junkie on Instagram and YouTube. I'm also a senior editor over at kaijuunited.com.
There we go, that's better. There we go. I'm getting a little loopy. It's a lot of panels. Hello everybody, welcome. My name is Daniel DeManna, and amongst other things, I am the creator and author of the Godzilla novelization project. And, oh, thank you. You guys are too sweet, thank you. I write academically on the history of monster films. I write fiction about monster films. You can hear me on 1,000 different podcasts. Blah, 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 let's go.
Hello, my name is Elijah Thomas. I'm the host of the podcast Kaiju Conversation. I'm also a contributor to Kaiju United. I also work with SRS Cinema. I produce bonus features for their Kaiju and Tokusatsu Blu-rays. So, did anybody go to the Pickwick this weekend? Yes. Yes? Okay. Who went to a sold-out showing of a movie that came out 20 years ago? A lot of us? Okay, awesome. Now,
Although let's ask, did unfortunately anybody get turned away?
Come on, don't remind them.
I just want to say my heart is with you guys. I almost got turned away. I was one of the last few they let in, and I was like, I felt so bad and I would have been depressed myself if I didn't make it, and I would probably be very sad crying here. So I just wanted to say my heart goes out to you guys.
We feel your pain.
But to answer your question, yes, Don Fry is immaculately good looking on the big screen. It is a sight to be seen.
His mustache was bigger than all of us, projected larger than human scale, and the way it was meant to be seen, dare I say.
I think they went back in post and made it a little bit larger.
They might have. They might. No post could possibly top the perfect coiffedness of that mustache. It can't be done.
so speaking of the Pickwick, now, Billy, you've got a pretty fun story for us.
Okay, but before I say it, let me ask this question. Was anybody here at G-Fest 2005 and at that showing where they premiered the Chicago premiere of Godzilla Final Wars? Nobody here was there? Oh man, this was my first G-Fest, and I was so excited to see Godzilla Final Wars. Unfortunately, I had already seen it online, but I was still excited to be there with an audience to see it. And it was my real first time seeing how G-Fest attendees react to these films, like when the monster shows up, and all the funny things we do at that theater. So we get there, and the whole place is packed, just about near as packed as it was just now. And just some of the reactions that people had. I'll never forget when Minya first showed up. Everybody was so into it, but when Minya showed up, the audience, you could hear a pin drop. The audience got real quiet, and then somebody, and this also happened at this showing, somebody was like, "No, shoot him!"
That was me.
That was you?
Yeah.
Wow. History repeated itself. But no, just so the audience just had a great time, and there was a big standing ovation when the credits started hitting. And I'll also never forget this. Most of us actually stayed until the credits were over, and they gave it another standing ovation. Now that was the only difference, because I get people have seen Final Wars so many damn times that the standing ovation wasn't necessary for this one. We were just happy to really sell that place out. So, yeah.
I do love that there were some parts where, because people were getting into it, there were parts where people were actually talking along with the lines. So in the New York City scene with the homeless guy, everyone was going like, "Great, go for it. Oh, it's a big birdie." That's why I love G-Fest. Everybody's just there like, we all seen the movie. We don't need to be quiet. We all know what happens. Let's have some fun.
Yeah. Now, speaking of fun, this film I think has easily one of the most interesting legacies in the fandom from when it came out 20 years ago to present day. So, Billy, what do you remember about the initial response to this film when it came out?
Well, that's the funny thing. Like I said, everybody was applauding it. We were so happy. There was intensity and energy in the air. And then I come back to G-Fest the very next day. And I'll never forget, there were flyers strewn everywhere. Like somebody at high school starting a very bad rumor just to cause chaos. There's this, what looks like this guy on his bed, and he looked either sick or drunk or whatever. And the flyer said, "This is what happens when you see Final Wars at the Pickwick." And I'm like, did I not see all you guys applauding this thing? And they're all trashing it. They're all saying, "Oh, that film was awful. I can't believe this is how they have him go out for his 50th anniversary." I'm like, you guys were all applauding it. What are you talking about?
Yeah, something doesn't add up here. Someone was just trying to stir up trouble.
And another thing, I took several photos of the long line, because people still knock this film today, and it just never ceases to amaze me. But yet, we sold out at the Pickwick. I don't think any other film did that this year, right? So anytime somebody tells me how bad Final Wars is, I'm going to show them those pictures and be like, "You were saying? The numbers don't lie."
People love this movie. People love this insane, wacko, gonzo movie with all their hearts, and it's an amazing movie.
It is, dude. Like,
I love to see the love. This is awesome.
It's a movie that is seemingly always in my ever-changing list of top 5 Godzilla films, because in my opinion, it checks off all the boxes that you need for a good Godzilla film. You want a fun story? Check. You want interesting and engaging humans to carry the film when the kaiju are off-screen? Don Fry does that himself. Like he carves it with his sword. You want a good kaiju action? That scene, when I was younger, I used to replay that scene where Rodan attacks New York City all the time. Like, I'm surprised my DVD copy of Final Wars didn't wear out. Like, that scene is so cool. It also was, I feel, the only film in the Millennium era that sort of stood out and really took advantage of the Millennium era being an anthology. Because if you think about it, if you think of the other 5 films, I think
they all had their own continuities except for Godzilla X Mechagodzilla and Tokyo SOS.
Well, yes, but they all, like, on paper, they all feel like the same movie. Or not on paper, like if you really think about it, they all feel like the same movie. Yes, they tell different stories. Yes, they follow different continuities, but they all feel similar, like the tones are similar, the movie making styles are very similar, and like even down to stuff like the color correction, they're all very similar. Now, I'm not trying to trash the Millennium era films. I love the Millennium films with all my heart, but they really had a missed opportunity when they decided this is going to be an anthology series. And Final Wars, it just was like, no, we are going in a completely different direction. Like, it really looked like they took it to the level of, it's going to be a typical early 2000s action film. We're going to use digital equipment. We are going to have a completely unique soundtrack. Like Keith Emerson, rest in peace, did an amazing job, like with those organs and the track that plays when they're fighting Ebra and Kazama flies that plane into the Exilian ship. Like, that is just hype music. Like, it's available on Spotify, and I put it on my gym playlist. It gets you hyped. But yeah, it really did a great job at standing out in the Millennium era.
And we talked about it on our -1 panel. So the unfortunate nature of the Millennium era was that it was created out of fear of the release of the 1998 film, and Toyama, the new producer, kind of rushed the next era of Godzilla films. And it's also important to note, so 2000 was directed by Takeo Okawara, director of Destroya, was it Mechagodzilla and Mothra?
I'm sorry, can you say that again?
Tezuka-san?
Okawara.
No, you're going back. Yes, it was him.
Yeah. And then you had Tezuka, who directed Megaguirus and then the Kiryu Saga. And then of course you have Shutsuke Kaneko doing GMK. Now, Okawara and Tezuka were Toho directors. They worked for Toho. They didn't really go outside of the studio sphere. They just kind of did whatever Toho handed them. Kaneko was the only one they didn't let in from in-house. He was one that, I mean, obviously he directed the Daiei Gamera Heisei trilogy, among a ton of other films. But Kaneko was kept under a very tight leash. As we all know, Varen and Anguirus were also supposed to be in GMK, but Toho said, no, you got to use Mothra and King Ghidorah. But for Godzilla Final Wars, which initially was under the title of The Godzilla, for some reason, Toho wanted to go outside of...
Like the Batman? Sorry.
Yeah, like the Batman. They wanted to go outside of their typical pool of directors, and recently in the year 2000, this indie filmmaker financed a film called Versus, and his name was Ryuei Kitamura.
Yes.
And it's funny because Kitamura, the thing that they loved about Kitamura was how influenced by American films he was, which is kind of ironic because that was something a lot of film historians bring up about Akira Kurosawa, how a lot of his films felt like Westerns more so than your traditional Japanese film. And so after a couple films, Kitamura did a film, after Versus, he did a film called Returner. He would end up doing a film called Azumi, Alive, and then he worked on a film called Sky High, and during the production of Sky High, he got attached to Final Wars. But for Kitamura, Toho said, do what you want. You have free reign. And they wanted him to make a Ryuei Kitamura film before making a Godzilla film. And from what I've heard, that's been a lot of people's complaints is because Kitamura has high octane. I mean, his film production company is called Napalm Films. He wanted his films to be high octane, very energetic, very exciting. And you see a lot of that through the action, the editing, the music, everything about the film is Ryuei Kitamura, especially if you would watch like Versus or Alive.
Yeah, and one thing that a lot of people, and especially I'm a huge fan of this guy, James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd, he pointed, yep.
He needs to come
yes,
here.
He should be here at this table talking with us. But if you have seen his Godzilla-thon review for Final Wars, he makes a good point in that so many of us are used to seeing films with monsters destroying each other and humans talking, whereas this film is monsters fighting and humans fighting, which is a nice change-up for a Godzilla film finally.
Like that motorcycle scene was awesome. Like, I kind of wish it lasted a little bit longer, not gonna lie.
So, yeah. Anyway.
And I think that's something that this film brings, like a lot of people, especially younger fans, love the high energy of the film. There's never really a moment where the film stops to breathe. In those few moments, there's some nice personal moments, mainly between Ozaki and another character. But for the most part, they do a very good job at keeping it pretty high energy throughout the film.
Oh, yes. So, should we talk about some stats of the film? The Godzilla suit made?
I was actually gonna, before we moved on, we were on the topic of Kitamura. So, for those of you that don't know, on Kaiju United, myself and our editor-in-chief, Jacob Lingle, we actually got the chance to interview Ryuei Kitamura, and there was one question that I wanted to make sure I asked him. It was about the Godzilla versus Zilla scene. And we don't have something to plug it into, but I would just like I'm just gonna play it over the mic and we'll see how good this goes.
When Godzilla faced off against the American Godzilla, whose idea was that?
That was, of course, my idea. And Tomiyama-san said that, we have the rights for that. We can use it if we want. Of course, I want to use it. I want to beat the shit out of that guy. It's going to be like one punch knockout thing.
Was it personal at all? Like, take this TriStar for...
No, I mean, Roland Emmerich, I admire him. I mean, Independence Day, come on, that's a classic. And I even enjoyed the first, Hollywood Godzilla movie. It just, I just couldn't see that. It's a giant, big lizard monster movie. I just couldn't believe that it was a Godzilla. And like, come on, eating tuna? Come on. No. I thought it's just a fun, crowd pleasing moment, and it was.
Ryue Kitamura, ladies and gentlemen.
We can play it at the end. I still need to find it, but we also asked him about the casting process of Don Fry. We can play that at the end, though.
Yeah, if you guys have not checked out this interview, it is on another level. Kaiji United absolutely crushed it with the questioning, and Ryue Kitamura, I've been very happy, before we move on, just to kind of see his image within the Godzilla universe and the fan community really kind of be rehabilitated, because there's so many misconceptions about how he approached the film and how he felt about Godzilla. I remember for years people used to say, well, he's not a Godzilla fan. What? Like, these are things that have no basis in reality, or like he didn't care, he just wanted the money. Like, just stuff that's made up that people took as fact, and it's all completely nonsense. He clearly loves this stuff, and just seeing interviews like what you guys did, like, to helping really clean the slate of all that negative nonsense and just set the record straight. It's a huge service, not only to all of the people out here who want accurate information, but for the man who gave us this movie to have what he really felt be told to the world. So thank you guys for that. That's amazing. Kaiji United.
His first, fun fact, he told us his first purchase when he moved to the United States, he was like, my first purchase, I got to get an American muscle car, and he bought a Mustang and brought it to, I think if I'm remembering correct, the garage that is Pimp My Ride. He brought it to the Pimp My Ride guys. Like, that was his first purchase. He's like, I live in America, I need an American muscle car, Mustang. That man, words cannot describe how much I love that man.
He's great. Now, I suppose we can move on and talk about the suit, as you were discussing?
Sorry.
No, we wouldn't have missed that for the world. That was beautiful.
Well, definitely, we got to touch base on this suit. This is quite a unique design we got, and it's definitely the most flexible and slimmest. And I know I hear a lot of people complain about the head looking like a rat or a cat.
Blah, 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 blah.
Cope.
I personally love it. I don't know, what do you guys think? Oh, sorry.
I like the design. I mean, granted, it's not my favorite design. That honor, of course, goes to the Kiryu Goji suit. Anyone else? Yeah! Oh, all right, cool. That scared me. I thought I was alone there. I think it really does a good job at wrapping up the Millennium Era. Like, this is going to be the last, or what we thought at the time was going to be the last Godzilla movie ever made. So let's do the design right. I'm also a huge fan of, it's not really much about the suit, it's about like the character. They made him super tall again. The Millennium Godzillas, they were a little on the shorter side, but they were like, nah, he's got to be, I think he was like, 350 feet or something?
Yeah, he was the full 100-meter Heisei height again, which they had not done since, because they bumped him back down to between 55 to 60 meters for the other 5 Millennium films, if for no other reason than just to make the miniatures look more realistic around him. But for this one, they're like, no, he's got to be a beast.
Yeah, and I just love how OP he is, like how insanely powerful. Like I know like in general people are like, oh, characters that are too powerful, they're not fun to watch. But Godzilla, Final Wars, Final Goji, man, I don't care. I don't care if I don't care if he's like the One Punch Man of the Godzilla franchise. It is just so much fun to watch him just Sydney, bam! Paris, bam!
You know what it's like? He's kind of like the Jason of kaiju. He's just walking around, nobody even hurts him.
He's a slasher.
Yeah, back to the angry video game nerd. Back to the angry video game nerd. Like, he goes around kicking the other monster's ass like a slasher in a horror film. Like, this movie is just, it satisfies my craving for, like, whenever I'm in the mood for just like a really don't gotta think too hard about it, bat crap insane, fun Godzilla film, it's this movie. Like, I don't care if the writing isn't the best. I don't care if the plot is just whatever. It's fun.
It's okay to have fun, everyone.
Yes.
It's okay to have fun.
Guys,
embrace having
there's
fun.
a lot wrong with the world right now. I think we can all do with some fun.
It's okay to have fun. Speaking to the suit, what I'll add to what you guys said is the actual design of the thing. I find it fascinating how much of Godzilla history has been crammed into that one costume, because it's got that Millennium edge to it, but it also has some Heisei proportionality, and it has Showa-era flexibility. And it has while it's doing all that and paying homage to the past, it is like almost like every other Godzilla design kind of crammed into one, but it's still doing its own thing. You would never mistake the Final Wars costume for any other costume. It looks so much like itself. It has that great glare and the great brow. It's actually been very nice to see it return for the Toho short films that have been done recently.
Those are great.
Yeah. And that's a stunt suit. It's not the actual original Final War suit. It was a promotional suit that was done, and it's looking a little tattered in a couple of shots. But who cares? It's Godzilla in a suit. It's
I like
a
that
suit.
the mouth is perpetually.
It's just
open.
perpetually just open, like a dog on a hot day. He's just ready to fight. But yeah, also we have to mention Tsutomu Tom Getagawa inside the suits. An amazing guy. Been here to G-Fest a few times. An incredible physical performer who gets to act in this film in a way he did not get to act in the previous 4 films that he did. He was not in GMK. But yes, watching him just go ham and fully, he's really letting out his inner Nakajima, if you think about it.
I actually heard a story from him at one of his panels or something that he actually wore the Game of Death Bruce Lee tracksuit underneath that Godzilla
I've
suit.
heard this. What a badass.
I believe
Jeez.
he is a practitioner of Kung Fu.
No, he's a martial artist. Absolutely. I mean, most of the people who were in Godzilla costumes were and kind of had to be martial artists.
Yes.
And I mean, Kitagawa-san also, in keeping in tradition, almost died several times making Godzilla movies. Nearly drowned once or twice. Things blew up in his face. These guys were hardcore, and it's not like you think you can get into a suit and make it move the way that the Final Wars suit does. No. It would probably kill most people.
Nakajima passed out multiple times.
Yeah, Nakajima, had got a concussion once. They routinely lost weight in these suits.
About 20 pounds.
Yeah. I mean, it's insane. It's insane. So every moment that you see of Godzilla moving is a Herculean effort to get something heavy to move, and it's just so beautiful to watch in the film. Just how quick he moves, and it's just great.
It's like the acting equivalent of fitness people doing the Iron Man.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I don't think there's much more I can really add. I mean, it's a great design. I think it's probably it is the best in the Millennium Era. It's probably in my top 5 if I had to guess. But no, they made it very angular so it could move around really fast and be more physical than previous suits. And it does a really great job at that. I know for this film, they wanted to also make it the largest monster roster ever, so they did a lot of work on the rest of the suits as well to make them more angular, easier to maneuver in, and have these more fast-paced sequences. I know in production, when Kitamura was designing and figuring out how the special effects sequences would work with the effects team, he wanted a more the camera to freely move around, higher energy. He loves, if you watch Versus, I'm pretty sure 80% of that film are these shots that are just rotating around all your human actors as they're staring down each other and fighting with their swords and their guns and whatnot. And so stuff like that is what they wanted in Final Wars. He wanted it to be this more energetic and kind of personal moments throughout the film with the cinematography and the kaiju, but they told him, they were like, we can't do that. There's no way we can get these suits in the set to do what you want. We can't have the camera right there. But you do see certain moments I specifically think about in the Godzilla, Anguirus, Rodan, and King Caesar sequence, which banger of a song, by the way. I love that song.
Yes.
You can see there's a lot of motion. There's a lot of kind of camera movement throughout that sequence, very akin to what Kitamura did. And all of that comes down to, how he wanted it to look. So the Godzilla suit's a perfect one-to-one to what Kitamura wanted in those sequences.
What's next, gentlemen? There's so much to talk about.
We should mention how there were 3 of the Godzilla suits made for different shots, for close-up, one for action, and one for super action. I have my notes here.
Speaking of suits, has anyone seen that behind-the-scenes picture of Minya when he's at the end when he's doing this? when the guy is just wearing shorts and he's only wearing half the suits. That's just, I don't know what it is about that picture, man. There's just something so funny about that.
There's something upsetting and unsettling about Minya with person legs.
Yeah. It's pretty uncanny if you think about it.
I'm not a Manila hater by any stretch, but there's something about that that's dangerously close to sleep paralysis demon. Like, I don't know.
That and like the behind the scenes with Megaguirus, where they got the human legs out of the half
the person legs just sticking out of the bottom. That's a whole genre. It's like the reverse of the famous Nakajima image where he's wearing the bottom of the suit as suspenders.
The difference is that looks cool though.
Yeah, the rest of it just looks, it's cool when you do that, and then when you reverse it, it's like, what's wrong with the lower half of this person's body? I can't look at this anymore.
Wait, he didn't have like spaghetti legs or anything.
No. But it's just a weird visual.
Yeah.
We should touch on Wakasa and how he designed a lot of he designed a lot of the suits, but he had a lot of people also working under him for all the other monster suits.
It was a huge team. I mean, they did over a dozen different costumes for this crazy thing, costume/props, because we're also talking marionettes. Manda, when he wasn't CGI, was a marionette. Mothra, obviously a marionette. But the insane amount of stuff that had to be done for this, it's crazy. And none of the monsters look any like how they did before. They're all fresh designs. So they had to completely design them differently and then build them. And they also had to build them super flexible. Yeah. You know, like King Caesar is doing weird, crazy kung fu stuff, and Anguirus is both bipedal and quadrupedal, and so they had to design a suit that could be crawled in. And there are scenes, and they're wire assisted, where the suit actor is galloping in the Anguirus suits. It's crazy. And then he stands up, and they had to design a prop to make him, like the ball that rolled, that was its own separate thing, and then obviously the monsters at the end. Crazy amount of work.
Wait, so you're telling me that suit actor wasn't that flexible, he could really get into a ball?
Listen.
That wasn't practical?
Listen,
that whole transformation scene?
I hate to burst the kaiju bubble here, but there are some things that would probably be illegal to do to a person on the set of the We're going to crunch you up into a ball and drop you from the ceiling. Have fun with that. Make sure your last will and testament's in order.
That's in the fine print of the contract.
Yeah, very, very fine print. You might die while making this movie.
I'm just giving you guys a chance to speak here.
I'm trying to think here. I'm friends with one of the people that worked on it, and I remember, if I remember correctly, what Issei-san has mentioned about the suits itself is how difficult it was to really develop the suits to be that flexible. You know, specifically when we're talking about King Caesar and whatnot. You know, they had to lift the suit actor with wires to do this kind of kick maneuver. And, you know, among all of that, there's also the editing that has to go into that. So they had to be really clever with some of the shots. And, you know, in certain sequences, like the Godzilla versus Zilla fight, they had to use a CGI render instead of an actual suit for the monster. So there was even more work that had to be put in to perfectly match that sequence. And for like Zilla, they scanned in a very large toy to get the model.
The Trendmaster's Ultimate.
And so they had to really work on how to get Godzilla to, you know, he hits him with his tail and flings him into the Sydney Opera House. And so they had to find a way to perfectly sync that up and key in the animation to do what they wanted it to do for sequences like that. So there's a lot of work that they had to put into this to make the effects look the way they do.
I promise I'm not shamelessly self-promoting, but Kitamura went into detail on a lot of this in the interview.
Read the interview, it's really... I'll shamelessly self-promote for you.
All right.
I can do that, that's fine.
What episode is it?
It's not an episode. If you go on our website, and it's under our interviews tab, you can type in his name in the search bar, it should come up.
Worth it.
We...
I'm sorry.
No.
Sorry, I didn't
No,
know you were done. One thing I wanted to piggyback on the flexibility of the suit. One thing they did different to the Godzilla suit here for Kitagawa, they double jointed the armpits so he could really lift his arms up and do some punches and stuff like that. Because I always love when Godzilla has big, flexible arms and he's able to punch. Not like this.
Speaking of flexibility, I love, if we're on the topic of like monster designs, I think they really redeemed Rodin's Heisei design, because I don't know how many of you guys agree, but the Heisei Rodin design, while it looks cool, they got the mobility of that thing, like, it was awful. And it's why the Final Wars Rodan is one of my favorite monster designs of all time, because it got the modern look of, or the upgraded look of the Heisei, the Heisei era, and the mobility of the Showa era. And I really was a fan of how like flexible, or how convincing he was both flying and like on the ground when he was on foot fighting with Godzilla, with Anguirus and King Caesar.
And the CG version is actually pretty darn good too.
Oh yeah.
It integrates very, very well. A lot of the Godzilla films of the era have had kind of a tricky time matching the CG versions of the monsters to the actual physical suits. And they really did a good job, like with this one, because Rodan looks pretty good in that regard. There are scenes where a fair number of them, Manda is another good example. Manda looks just as good either way, you know, because they wanted to compensate for some of the lack of mobility you get out of moving with wires with Manda. So it's cool, and it shows the evolution of different techniques, because there's a lot of CG in this, which also kind of dovetails into the fact that this film, in terms of its legacy, it is clearly not, it's been 20 years, it is not the last Godzilla film they ever made, but it is the last one that they've ever made with suits. So it is still the bookends.
Unless you count those short films they've been making.
Yeah, I mean the feature length films.
But
They've
yeah.
obviously used suits again for special appearances in short films, like that great Pachinko video where he fights the GMK Ghidorah, and obviously this exact design came back for the recent short films. There will be a new short film coming in November this year. Yes.
Do we have confirmation if it's going to be like where the Jet Jaguar one left
It
off?
will be a sequel. It will
Hell
be a
yeah,
sequel.
I cannot wait for that.
Jet Jaguar and Godzilla are going to team up against Ghidorah. Yes.
A reunion. How
Yes.
many years in the making? How, like 50 years since?
Many years. And who
Let's
knows
go.
who else might show up in this thing? I mean, it's 50th anniversary of Mechagodzilla. Who knows what they might dust off? Space Godzilla. Yeah, they could do all kinds of stuff. Maybe King Caesar will pop in. Maybe Gigan won't be dead and he'll come. They'll just take every suit they have and throw. Who knows?
The giant condor.
Yeah, can we please? Yes, I'm into that.
Let's get real niche. Orga, yeah, I like that answer.
It was also kind of the end of an era for a lot of aspects with Toho with this film, because this was the last time they used the big pool that they had used for a lot of the classic films. And I've read how sad of a day that was when they finally deconstructed it after this film.
Filled it in with cement. Yeah, a lot of stuff. And they filled in pools as publicity stunts before. In the 90s, they filled in the old school classic big pool. And then they filled in the last practical one on set when Final Wars wrapped. So they did it basically twice in 9 years as a publicity stunt, but there was like, no, we mean it this time. We're not putting people in costumes, and we're not putting those costumes into water anymore. And that was it. It was like, we've really got to beef up the fact that we're not going to do any of these, at least for a while. The plan was never to fully never touch Godzilla again. That's a bit of a myth, but the plan was to at least put them on ice for a decade, maybe longer, because at this point, there was, you know, the dreaded Godzilla fatigue, which thankfully we have not hit yet in our current spike of Godzilla content. But at the time, excluding the gap of time between 95 and 98, there was a Godzilla film pretty much every year for almost 15 years at that point, 13, 14 years. If you go back to even farther, it was, you know, since 1989, only a few years without a Godzilla film. So they were done. They were done. The audiences weren't showing up. They didn't show up for Tokyo SOS, and sadly, the audiences did not show up for Final Wars, which is a real bummer. It was
The G-Fan sure did.
We did, but general audiences were not biting at the time, and it was not a successful film. And so that contributed to putting it on ice as well. But even all these years later, it's kind of interesting, if bittersweet, to think that its status as kind of a bookend in the Godzilla franchise is still intact in a way. Yes, there have been more films, but we may never see another movie with, you know, 15 monsters, most of them in costumes, beating each other up ever again. Never say never, though. We live in hope.
Well, unless you want to see my fan film.
No,
I'm
now.
kidding.
If anybody out there has not seen Godzilla
self-promoting.
Battle
Don't-
Royale, get on it, because it'll blow your mind. It's amazing. Yes! Show it love.
That's just an unofficial fan film dream I did. And yes, Final Wars did inspire my fan film Godzilla Battle Royale a ton, but that was just a little joke. Sorry.
Do you guys think if we do see something like that, do you think it'll come from America or Japan first? Because we got two countries making Godzilla films simultaneously.
We're talking practical? The practical stuff?
Practical,
Yeah, or
CGI,
might as
doesn't
well
matter.
ask
I'm
that
just
question.
like Battle Royale.
Oh, okay.
Like Final Wars, like bring a huge roster of monsters.
So I don't think they're going to do that for a while.
Not for a while.
The issue with that is Final Wars cost a lot of money, and it lost a lot of money.
Yeah,
Creating that many monsters for a film is not something sustainable, and that's why when you look at the world of Godzilla, there's really only 3 films where they utilize a ton of monsters in it. That being Destroy All Monsters, which originally was supposed to be the original end of the franchise, even though they still had plans. And then you have All Monsters Attack, but 90% of that was all stock footage, so you can't really count that one. And then you have Final Wars, which they wanted to make it the biggest battle royale of all time. And very clearly, that didn't work in favor of the box office.
It didn't. For a film that cost 2 billion yen to make, nearly $20 million, it didn't get it back. It didn't get it back. That's a lot. That's a lot of money for a Japanese movie. That doesn't seem like a lot now in the world of Hollywood $200 million budgets. But
And to add insult to injury, it was up against The Incredibles and Haro's Moving Castle.
yeah, Howl's Moving Castle. So it
it
was Pixar and not Miyazaki.
Yeah, it had to go up against Disney and Miyazaki, so it was kind of a losing battle.
Sadly, yeah, timing was a part of it. They could have lucked out with it being the 50th anniversary, but it just was there was too much working against this film, and it happened, and then it was gone. And it was in terms of the film itself, I think we can all agree it's a banger of a way to go out. But in terms of yes, what a great ending. Yes.
There is one hypothetical I would like to bring up here. I always wish that this film had the marketing to have a very limited US run, because I think if it had, it might have added to a little bit to the success. I don't know, but what do you guys think?
Yeah, it's very obvious that Toho wanted the film to have a Western presence. I mean, they premiered the film in Hollywood. They wanted it to have a Hollywood premiere. But the unfortunate nature of Godzilla at the time was Sony was the one that was handling a lot of the distribution. And after 2000, they basically lost interest in developing theatrical releases for the rest of the films. They initially planned to do their own Godzilla 2000 sequel, Godzilla Reborn, I believe it was, and then they even toyed with the idea of adapting GMK into a US version, but all of that fell through when Godzilla 2000 did not meet their needs, their standards they had for the film. So for Final Wars, it's kind of disappointing because it
would have gotten over here in the US, I think. That's just me, though.
It unfortunately, like the rest of the Millennium era, it just went straight to DVD a year after it came out in Japan, and that's where it has lived for the last 20 years, pretty much, is on DVD, Blu-ray, and digital. Now, as we're speaking here about the kind of the fallout of the release and kind of what was going on at the time, what do you guys think about the fact that this was the 50th anniversary? Like, this was 50 years of Godzilla. Think about that. That's a long time. Like, a lot of people had opinions of that when it came out, especially with how it ended up impacting the franchise. What do you guys think it did a good job at honoring that legacy?
Oh, you want me to go first?
I thought you wanted to.
I think the best way to gauge the reaction that I've seen over the years of Godzilla Final Wars, people either really hate it or they really love it.
Yeah,
there's no in between. I don't know how you guys feel about that, but I'm the latter. I loved it.
I'm right there with you. I love it.
Yeah, I think we all do. I think this is a film that has, it's what it is. It's very, very polar. right? It's very, very polar. This is either a film that speaks to you or you want nothing to do with it. While we were watching, or after I returned after watching the film at the Pickwick, I may have surreptitiously recorded a little bit of it, just a couple of the big crowd reaction moments, and I threw a couple of them up on my Twitter page. Yes, I'm calling it Twitter. And there we go.
No. We love X. We love X.
You know, the joke was there, and I didn't take it. I
went right for that.
No, thank you. You got my back. And there was a comment left on one of my videos I threw up that said, "Oh man, if I'd have been there, I'd have been asleep in 5 minutes. It's so boring." What? I respect your opinion, but what? So it really goes to show you that either this is a film that hits home for you or you want nothing to do with it. There's no real middle ground. And I mean, we're exaggerating. Clearly there are people who are lukewarm. But what you hear is mostly exuberant praise or get this thing away from me. And it really is interesting. It's one of only a handful of Godzilla films that I would bifurcate like that so clearly down a love and hate thing. But I'd like to think that the joy that this film put out into the world by it existing is perhaps a little louder and a little more impactful than the people who didn't get anything out of it. And I think it is a heck of a way to celebrate 50 years. I think it ended things in a unique way. It's not like any other Godzilla film before or since. I think it ended things in a respectful way. And I'm going to cite as my evidence for this a favorite moment from the film. Elijah, you and I have talked about this moment. I think you know where I'm going with this, and feel free to weigh in. But there's a moment during that big progression to Tokyo. It's the moment after Kamakura has been Jason Voorheesed. The old gentleman, the hunter, and his grandson and Minala are watching, and the little boy asks this very simple question: why is this happening? Why is Godzilla destroying the city? And the depth of Godzilla is explained in that moment. The meaning behind Godzilla is explained in that moment. The metaphor comes back. In a movie that's been just crazy action the whole time, the soul and the meaning of Godzilla peeks through in that moment, and the old man says, there was a great fire, Godzilla was angry, and he will not forgive us. That monster will never forgive us. Yeah. He cannot forgive us. He cannot forgive mankind. There is a grudge that is being held, and that is why he is here. And that is as much a metatextual thing as it is an in-universe thing, because 50 years of Godzilla, he still hasn't forgiven mankind for the sin of atomic war. He still hasn't come to terms with it. And we haven't stopped fighting him back, because it's a two-way street. And at the end of the film, the monster stares down our characters, and the characters stare right back, guns raised, swords, like that's gonna do anything. But it's symbolic.
Worth a try.
It's worth a try, and it's symbolic. It's symbolic, it's part of the metaphor. And you get that great moment with the little boy, forgive, hold your hands up. And then Minala holds up his arms. And in that moment, the moment the music fades out and Godzilla turns, I get oddly emotional seeing that, because it feels like something has ended. It feels like something deep and traumatic has been moved on from. Not forgotten, because the horrors of war that inspired Godzilla should never be forgotten. That's why GMK exists, right? Don't forget or you're doomed to repeat it. But maybe it's possible to heal. Maybe it's possible to move on and learn from the past. And I find it wonderful that Kitamura-san worked that into the story subtly, but if you know the true meaning of Godzilla, you can feel it. And that, to me, is the perfect way to celebrate 50 years.
Hear, hear.
Well, I don't think you can get much better of an ending than that. So I think with that, that's the mic drop moment. We're running low on time, so we're going to wrap things up here. Thank you all for coming. Thank you all for attending.